Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear students of Teaching and Learning Evaluation class, previously we have talked about the instruction versus assessment and how they are interrelated one another. This meeting, we are about to discuss about the nature of student assessment. Here, nature is like the concept, or in bahasa Indonesia, it is more like hakikat. Ya, jadi hakikat dari penilaian siswa. Now I'm gonna show you the objectives of this chapter. Anyway, familiarize yourself to state the objectives of the meeting at the beginning of the class to your students, to your future students. Here are the 5 objectives after understanding the nature of student assessment. Please take a look at these 3 objectives and the other 2 mentioned on the slide after this one. Now let's talk about testing and performance assessment. First, testing. Previously we have talked about the kinds of testing, starting from multiple choice, true or false, matching, and etc. Second, performance assessment. It deals with an assessment measuring the mastery, where the students are required to actually perform the skill. Okay. Testing and performance assessment are necessary. Since they both are necessary, sometimes conducting them both is very important. What is the example of the situation requiring us to hold both kinds of tests? It's like to test the knowledge how to drive. When you join a driving course, there are 2 kinds of tests. A test to know your knowledge about what you should do while driving, like road signs and etc. And however, it doesn't stop there. It is very significant to check your skill to drive behind the wheel. The conclusion is it is very okay. It is also important to perform 2 kinds of tests to check the knowledge and also the skill. The second highlight of our material today is the major types of assessment methods. Okay, I'm quite sure you guys have seen this before since I have shared this in advance. So as you can see from the slide, there are 4 types of assessment methods: selected, supply response, restricted, and extended performance. First, selected response. As you can see from the slide, it requires the students to choose best answer among provided and probable answers, like multiple choice, true, false, and also matching test. Next, supply response. It gets more and more difficult. The students are required to answer the questions, requiring them to insert a word or short phrases. And then restricted performance, so it goes from response to performance. The main point is the word restricted. The students are asked to perform a highly structured task, but it is still limited. For example, like in a writing class, the students are writing an essay with given topics decided by the lecturer. So that's why it's called limited. Meanwhile, in extended performance, it is the most difficult performance the student should ever do. There is no limitation. They are free to perform a less structured task. Like, previously I mentioned about writing an essay with given topics. Now, for example, they are asked to write a short story and the theme is not decided. So the performance is not limited. Okay. The next point is the characteristics of assessment methods. There are 4 characteristics of assessment methods: realism of task, complexity of task, assessment time needed, and judgment in scoring. First, realism of task. Realism of task deals with how real or how relatable to real life an assessment is. For example, the realism of select response in multiple choice is very low, since the students, are given probable answers. Sometimes the performance can really be measured, but sometimes cannot. There is still, possibility they choose any answers, not knowing whether it is true or not. Yeah. Meanwhile, if it is compared to the extended performance, the mastery is highly measured without any limitation, so we can really see the student's mastery. The next characteristic is the complexity of task. It is related to how complex the task given to the student is. And let's talk about the complexity of selected response and extended performance. The selected response test is less complex in terms of the problems the students need to solve and the answer the teacher expects from them. Meanwhile, the extended performance provides the opportunities or the chances for the students with a broader, I think it's broader range of activities like, integrating the ideas with the skill learned before or learning how a problem is solved, that kind of skill. Alright, the third is about the time needed in doing or scoring the assessment. Some questions are easy to spread or to distribute to the students and also to score, like selected and short answer tests. However, performance assessment is very difficult to be assessed. Some assessments need weeks to finish scoring, like experimental study in a chemistry class, or need rubrics consisting of ideal performance as the range scale the student should achieve, like speaking or writing classes. Okay. The judgment and scoring is also different one another from the type of assessment methods. In multiple choice response, the teacher can easily judge whether answers are correct or not. However, it will be different if we talk about assessing the student's writing class. The teacher needs to read a whole text, and to judge it by using rubrics, which is very difficult to do and takes time. Okay, to sum up, this is the whole comparison between each type of assessment methods and the characteristics of assessment. Okay, next slide is about how is a student assessment be considered as effective. First, a clear conception of all intended learning outcomes. Previously we have talked about content standard, kalau tidak salah, if I'm not mistaken, while we are talking about planning and assessment. And the content standard should be broken down into many benchmarks. The benchmarks should be clear so the students are motivated to reach them in a semester. Next is a variety of assessment procedures need to be used. Like what I have mentioned about using both testing and performance assessment, we need to check the situation whether to use one of them or both. Giving a multiple choice test is sometimes relevant to check the mastery, but sometimes an essay to state his or her opinions need to also be done. Third, instruction relevance. A relevant instructional procedure needs to also be considered. What is meant by relevant here is, learning outcomes, assessment for the assignment, and assignment procedure should be relevant one another. 4. An adequate sample of student performance. We need to have an adequate sample for the student's performance. This means, in constructing a test, we need to select the material that can represent the student's mastery. For example, among 100 terms the student should master, we need to select only 20 of them. The 20 materials chosen should be able to check the student's mastery. Okay, next. The procedures need to be fair to everyone. Yeah, the procedure should be fair. There are several criteria to say that the procedure is fair or not. First, the procedure should make the learning outcomes clearer for the students. Yeah, and then the teacher should use the assessment procedure which is relevant with the learning outcomes. And next is the procedure should enough represent the student's performance assessment, and the result of the assessment can be used to develop the quality of learning process. 6. The specifications of criteria for judging successful performance. Yeah, the teachers need to have a kind of specification in judging whether the students are successful in performing a task, like in measuring speaking and writing skills. In order to measure the success in both tasks, a rubric should be employed. 7. Feedback to students that emphasizes strengths of performance and weaknesses to be corrected. Yeah, we have talked about the benefit of conducting an assessment is that we can evaluate whether the students have strengths or weaknesses. Yeah. After giving the students assessment, a feedback should be given to students which analyze the student's strength and weakness in performing a task. Next, must be supported by a comprehensive grading and reporting system. Yeah, effective students assessment should be conducted in terms of grading and reporting systems. Next objective is to know the types of result interpretation in assessment. There are two types of interpretation of the result of assessment. The first one is norm referenced and the other one is criterion referenced. Norm referenced interprets the student's achievement by comparing the result to others. For example, among the 40 students, Budi gets the highest rank in the class. So it means that Budi's result is being compared to the other 39 students. Meanwhile, for the criterion referenced, instead of giving or ranking the student, it actually evaluates the student by considering the skill they have mastered. So the assessment is like a statement mentioning like, student A can identify the main idea in a paragraph, or student can also identify the fact and opinion, or the student can construct a statement by using simple perfect tense. Okay, this table you can see in the slides. The table highlights the summary of norm referenced and criterion referenced in a testing. So it deals with principle use until nature of test plan, but it also it doesn't stop there. So it talks about item selection procedures and also performance standards too. Okay, I'm not gonna talk or describe more about the previous slides because it will be your future assignment. I think that's all for the presentation. Thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.